Good morning, AP Gov. Well, we start our last unit today in going over First Amendment and religion, one of my favorite topics. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do this face-to-face, but hopefully we can make it fun and exciting nonetheless. You're going to want to have turned in your worksheet prior to going through this so that you can receive credit for that worksheet, and then have the worksheet with you as we go through this, because you're going to want to change some answers based upon what we go over today. So make sure you have those things handy. And here we go. One of the first things that I had you do for this worksheet is to go over the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause is literally the first part of the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. That means two things, and these are the two things that you need to have at the top of your worksheet where it asks you about the Establishment Clause. Number one, we may not create a national religion. There is no Church of the United States, nor can we have an official religion. A lot of people claim that the United States is a Christian country. Well, that would be because it is a majority, but that is not the official stance of the government. The second thing that the Establishment Clause does is that it states that the government must remain neutral toward religion. It means that it cannot help or hurt religion. It has to remain neutral. And we'll go over what that means as far as our studies goes. As far as schools go, school officials may not formally organize or support any religious activity. In fact, you all have more rights than I do. You may pray at school. The concept of school prayer, you can pray before any test, you can pray before lunch or after lunch, you can pray at the very beginning of the day. That is all fine and good, as long as it's not part of the official school day, because the government, and in this case the school, must remain neutral. So when you're talking about the Establishment Clause, you are dealing with topics that deal with the question, can the government do whatever the question is about the case? And so the Establishment Clause deals with the government, whereas the Free Exercise Clause deals with individuals, us. And the Free Exercise Clause states that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so basically it says that it is not supposed to prohibit, and this is the key, and this is where I would have asked you the question, what did you have written down? And many of you would have had that you can freely participate in any religious ceremony whatsoever, and that is wrong. And my comeback to you would have been, if my religion says that I must kill a virgin every month, would I be allowed to do so? And of course the answer to that would be no. What the Free Exercise Clause states is that you may believe whatever you want to believe. If you want to believe that Dave Matthews is a walking God, then you may do so. If you want to believe in the people who wear the spaghetti strainers on top of their heads, I forgot what it's called, and I'm sure a whole bunch of you are shouting the answer right now. If you want to believe that wearing a spaghetti strainer on the top of your head gives you magical powers, you may certainly do that. And as far as school goes, you may do private things like read your Bible, say prayers before tests or before lunch. So the Free Exercise Clause deals with, can an individual do something? The Establishment Clause asks, can the government do something? And so if the court case is about whether government can do something, you must use the Establishment Clause. If it's about whether an individual can do something, you must use the Free Exercise Clause. Those are two very important clauses that you're going to need to know and understand the differences between. Where do we get the idea of a separation between church and state? Where do we get that phrase, or that there's a wall of separation between church and state? That was a clause, that was a statement made by Jefferson, and so it's not in the Constitution. It is what Jefferson used in order to describe what was in the Constitution. All right, so let's take a look at our first case. Our first case deals with this phrase: Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, and our teachers. So I would have asked you at this point in time, is this a prayer? And most of you, I think, would have stated, yes, it is. This was what was read in all public schools in the state of New York, because the state of New York School Board wrote this statement/prayer to be said at the beginning of every morning. And so imagine starting Parkway West every day over the intercom, reciting this prayer. This is the basis of Engel v. Vital. And the question is, can the state government mandate that a written prayer made by them has to be read at the beginning of every day? So those are the facts of the case. Stephen Engel, who was a parent, sued the state school board, and the state school board president was Vital, and he basically said that this is prohibited by the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And so the question was whether the prayer created by the school board is an example of the state establishing a religion. And the Supreme Court said that this was unconstitutional. The Establishment Clause must mean that in this country, the government must have no part in composing official prayers for any group to be recited. And so this is the preeminent case. This is the case you have to remember. This is a required case. So put a star next to this one. This one has basically, for, as you can see, almost 80 years now, or excuse me, almost 60 years now, has basically stopped school prayer from happening. And so it'll be interesting with the more conservative Supreme Court whether or not this gets challenged. And I could very well see in your lifetimes school prayer being brought back. I'm not sure that's going to happen in my teaching career, although I think the chances are much better. We will see. But as of right now, the school cannot officially make it part of their school day to pray, and that is because of this case right here. So the resulting cases that we're going to study, then, we're trying to find loopholes in the preceding case. And you'll notice one thing. If you take a look at all of the school prayer cases that the Supreme Court has ruled on, they have all one thing in common. Hopefully you got it. It's that they were all ruled unconstitutional, which is, again, why school prayer has not found its way throughout a majority of the educational facilities in the United States. It certainly happens more, I would bet, in the South, but it does not happen overall in the United States, and that's because of this case and the cases that we're about to go over. So in Abington versus Schempp, the school district of Abington said, okay, we're not going to create a prayer. We're just going to mandate that we're going to recite 10 verses from the Bible and also recite the Lord's Prayer. For those of you who are not Christian, the Lord's Prayer starts, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And then it goes on and on and on. It is a Christian prayer. And so Muslims, Jews, Hindus do not say it, use it. And so the school district said that we're going to read 10 random verses from the Bible and recite the Lord's Prayer. It said that parents who wanted their kids to opt out could opt out, and those kids would sit in the hallways. And that's going to be also important to that, and we'll talk about why. So Edward Schempp sued, stating that forcing his child to sit in the hallway gave an appearance of conduct that was being punished. It made his kid look bad and made his kid stand out uncomfortably, and so therefore the question was requiring the reading and the reciting of the Lord's Prayer in violation of the Establishment Clause, and does it make it okay that parents could opt their kids out? And as you've pretty much figured out, the Supreme Court invalidated all of this, saying that the place of religion in our society is an exalted one through a long tradition of the home, the church, and the individual heart and mind. But then here's the key. In the relationship between man and religion, the state is firmly committed to a position of neutrality. And so they go on to say in this case that schools can study religion in an academic way, but it cannot make kids say the Bible verses and the Lord's Prayer. And so before these, you could see that they did pray in school. And so there are pictures of kids praying in school back in the old days before these Supreme Court cases came out. And as I said before, is it happening today? Probably in some locations. Wallace v. Joffrey, I'm going to have you look this one up if you want to. This is about whether or not schools can have moments of silence or not. And so take a look at this one if you're interested. It's a fun one, and it does get you thinking about some things. The next one we're going to take a look at is Lee versus Weissman. The Weissman children went to the same middle school, and the first child, when she graduated from 8th grade, they had a graduation ceremony, and they had a religious leader say a prayer at that graduation. That person happened to be a Baptist minister, and he thanked Jesus Christ for inspiring the students. The Weissmans are Jewish. 3 years later, when the other Weissman child graduated 8th grade, another religious person was brought in to speak, and this time it was a rabbi, and the Weissmans again objected, even though they were Jewish. And they objected because they thought that having a prayer at graduation was not right. And so the Weissmans sued the school district in order to stop the giving of a prayer. The school district said that because they were randomly rotating the speaker who was offering the prayer, that was okay, and that because the person was not of the school district, that made it okay. And so that's the way that they tried to get around the previous rulings. And so the question was that, does the First Amendment allow non-school officials to offer prayers at school functions, and does the fact that they rotated those speakers make it any better? And the answer was no, you cannot do this. There was an argument that students don't have to attend in order to graduate, that they've already graduated by their work, and so this is just like a ceremony. And it also said that, hey, this only happens once a year. It's not like it happens every day, and so therefore it's okay. And the Supreme Court rejected all of those, saying that the Constitution forbids the state to exact religious conformity from a student as a price of attending their own high school, or in this case, middle school graduation. And so this banned prayers at graduation, and graduations are considered school-sponsored events, and so therefore they have to follow the same rules. So then we get into Santa Fe versus Doe. The school district of Santa Fe said, okay, since students already have the right to pray, let's just go ahead and use that. And so what they did is at football games, they picked 3 random students and basically said, you may say whatever you want to say over the intercom at the football game. And it just so happens that at every time that they did this, at least one of the 3 students offered a prayer to the crowd. And so somebody in the crowd one night said that shouldn't happen and sued the school district, stating that that's a violation of the Establishment Clause. The school held a vote of the student body and upheld the practice and said that they wanted it to continue. So the question is, can you put these sorts of questions up to votes? And so the question is, does the school have the right to have prayer if students vote on it, and does it make it okay that they're the ones that are leading it, and does it extend to school activities? And the court's decision was in 6-3 that it should not be happening, and that, again, it is a school-sponsored event, and that because you are handing over the mic, those students are, in fact, school spokesmen. And so what they say can be regulated by the government. Prayers delivered by students does not constitute private speech because they're doing it over the public address microphone, and that therefore does not make it private. And so then I asked you to look up what was going on in Coons, and this is what's going on in Coons. And so I'm going to have you guys do a Flipgrid video today on this. The cheerleaders made these signs for the football team to run through. And so my question is, are these signs okay? The cheerleaders say this is their private, these signs are theirs and theirs only. And so because it is theirs, they can do whatever they want. They are shown at football games. The football team does run through them at home games. And so my question is, if you are a Supreme Court justice, would you allow for these signs to be okay? I'm also going to throw this at you. For those who say yes, if I changed the word Christ to Allah, would you still feel the same way? And so that's something to think about as you're thinking about this issue. And so I'm going to set up a Flipgrid video for you to follow through and give me your thoughts on this. Marsh versus Chambers just talked about whether or not legislatures can do a prayer before they start working for the day, and the Supreme Court said yes, that's okay. All right, First Amendment and teaching. You have a court case called Edwards v. Aguiar that I had you do. Basically, this is testing whether or not a state can mandate that if you teach evolution, then you must also teach creationism. Creationism is the belief that God created the earth and heavens in 6 days and then rested on the seventh. And so what the state of Louisiana said is if your school teaches evolution, then you must also balance it with the opposite philosophy of creationism. And so they mandated that both be taught. If one is taught, then both must be taught. And the question is, may the state of Louisiana force teaching of creationism along with evolution? And the Supreme Court ruled that that is unconstitutional. The purpose of the Creationism Act was to restructure a science curriculum to conform to a particular religious viewpoint. Because the primary purpose of the act is to advance a particular religion, it violates the Establishment Clause because governments are supposed to be neutral. And so that is why Parkway West teaches evolution, but it does not teach creationism in its science courses. Now, we could teach creationism in a Bible study course or in a religious studies course, but we cannot do it as part of the science curriculum because it is not considered a scientific theory. It is considered a religious theory. Can we put the 10 Commandments in a classroom? The answer is no, we cannot, because of Stone versus Graham. The state of Kentucky said that they wanted to have the 10 Commandments in every classroom. The Supreme Court said that is illegal because some of those laws are plainly non-secular or have no secular purpose, and that it is a religious document. And so that is why we do not have 10 Commandments posted all over Parkway West. Then we get into the holiday season, and we have this nativity scene along with Santa Claus and the reindeer. There's also a Christmas tree somewhere around, and this is about Lynch versus Donnelly. The city of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, erected a Christmas display at the city's shopping district. So this was a public area, but the city of Pawtucket, Rhode Island paid for it. So basically they were using taxpayer money. The display included Santa's house, a Christmas tree, and a nativity scene. And it also had a sign that said Season's Greetings. Daniel Donnelly objected to the display and sued the mayor, Dennis Lynch. Does the inclusion of a nativity scene in a city's display violate the First Amendment? And the answer was no, because they said that no religious significance was there. The court said that the display taken as a whole did not advocate particular religious messages. Those who are against it would say that because it only included a Santa, Christmas tree, and nativity scene, all of those are Christian symbols, that should have said that they were advocating a Christian message. Then the ACLU sued Allegheny, Pennsylvania, because inside of their courthouse, which you see on the left, they put a nativity scene inside of the courthouse, and that was ruled unconstitutional in Allegheny versus the ACLU. So inside a public building is very different than outside in a public area. All right, so now we're going to switch real quickly to the free exercise clause. So everything that we had discussed previous to this was about whether the government can do something. Now what we're going to do, because of the free exercise clause, is we're going to ask, can we do certain things? Can individuals do certain things? And the first one, obviously there are couples that are well known. Reynolds versus the United States made polygamy illegal in the United States. I believe it was with a Mormon individual for that one. And then can states ban the working on Sabbaths? That was another one. But the one that I want to show you, and the one that's also required for the free exercise clause, is Wisconsin versus Yoder. Jonas Yoder and Wallace Miller were both members of the Amish religion. And they basically wanted their kids to start working on the farm at an early age and not have to go to public school up until the age of 16, which is what the state of Wisconsin stated. And so the three parents refused to send their children to schools after the 8th grade, arguing that high school attendance was contrary to their religious beliefs because they wanted their kids to get training at home. And so was Wisconsin's requirement that parents send their children to school up until 16, does that violate their free exercise clause? And the Supreme Court held that an individual's interest in free exercise does outweigh sometimes the state's interest in compelling school attendance. And so in this case, the individuals won. Yoder won. And so this is one of the first examples where a person's First Amendment free exercise right beat out the government's right. And so this sort of then establishes that, hey, people's rights sometimes are stronger than the government's. But out of the ones that we are going to study, it kind of goes back and forth. But this is the one that you need to know along with Engel v. Vitale. The other famous one, Employment Division of Oregon versus Smith. Al Smith, which you see here listed the picture, he worked at a private drug rehabilitation organization, but as part of his religion, he also ingested peyote. And at his job, being a private drug rehab center, people there were not allowed to test positive for drugs. Well, when he was given a drug test, he failed it because of the peyote. When he was fired, he stated, I shouldn't be fired because it's part of my religion. I am ingesting peyote as part of a religious ceremony to give him religious visions. And this had been going on in the Native American church for hundreds of years. They were fired, and so then he applied for unemployment. When he was then denied unemployment because he was found guilty of an illegal crime, taking drugs. And so that automatically makes you ineligible for state unemployment benefits. So he sued, saying, again, I was taking it because of a religious belief. And so the question is, does the state drug law violate the free exercise? Should he have a right to take peyote as part of his religion? And the Supreme Court said that they have never held that an individual's religious beliefs excuse him or her from compliance with otherwise valid laws. And so allowing exceptions to this law would open up a prospect of constitutionally required exemptions from all types of civic obligations. And so basically Al Smith lost, that the states can punish drug use even if it's for religious purposes. And then we have the Church of Lukimi Babalu I versus Hialeah, Florida. The Church of Lukimi Babalu I is a Afro-Caribbean one based on Santeria, and they do use animal sacrifice, in this case chickens, to slaughter. When the city of Hialeah, Florida heard that the church was going to open up one of their churches in Hialeah, Florida, they quickly adopted a law saying that you cannot sacrifice, or you cannot have animals for the purpose of sacrifice or slaughter, except for things like a butcher shop. And so basically they were making a law directed at the Church of Lukimi Babalu I. And so the question is, does Florida's law violate the free exercise clause? And the Supreme Court held that because the law was not neutral or generally applicable, and it was really directed toward the church itself, it was illegal. The core failure of the law was that it applied exclusively to the church. And basically they said this is an example of a bill of attainder, which is one of the 4 things that Congresses or legislatures cannot do. And so this is it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this look at religion. Remember that the required cases are Engel v. Vitale and Wisconsin v. Yoder. And please remember your Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause. Thanks a lot.